Hi, everyone. Welcome to my channel. Today I'm joined by lovely guest, Zara Northover. She is going to share with us her battle, right, against fighting against workplace retaliation, just the things that she has been enduring, unfortunately, which I know a lot of people in my audience can resonate as we speak about Black women in toxic jobs so often. But yes, I'll introduce myself and I'll pass it over to Zara. So I'm Marissa Price. I'm a healing practitioner helping sensitive, introverted, and or high achieving Black women heal from things like traumatic workplace experiences, narcissistic abuse. And that is the purpose of this channel, to create a safe place for us to share what we've been through, to process it, to share resources with each other. And with that, I'll pass it over to Zara to introduce herself.
Thank you. Thank you, for Marissa, for having me. And thank you for everybody that's tuned in. You know, I'm much more hip now, right, to these platforms and things that people have created so we could talk about it. So definitely thank you for creating a safe space like this. But my name is Zara Northover. I am a 2008 Olympian. I always start off usually by saying I'm a human being because that's what we all are first and foremost, right? I may have maybe a Black
Mhm.
woman, but I am a human being as well. And, but I'm a business development consultant. I have my own brand, Moving in Faith, which I'm wearing prototype today, as well as I am a pro se litigant. I am a Black woman that is self-representing myself in front of the Michigan Supreme Court right now for a case against workplace retaliation against Rocket Mortgage. I worked for that organization for almost 7 years, 6 years before, 6 or 7 years before this all started. It's been 5 years that I've been in this lawsuit, so these things do take a
Wow.
long time. But yeah, it started
Okay.
about 4 years, going on 5 years, 2021. And I wasn't always a self, right? I wasn't always pro se. So pro se is the term for self-representing. So I did have an attorney in the beginning of this journey, and but just didn't stay that way. One of the things I like to share is that it's so important to make sure that we know who to find or who to reach out to
Mhm.
represent us. And no shade to anyone, right, in the beginning, but they weren't employment lawyers, right? They weren't the right, like, they're just starting out. So to go up against a major corporation, that wasn't the right fit, right? So it ended up me getting them suggesting to get another attorney. But before we get into that weeds, I wanted to make sure I at least just kind of share, this is who I am, right? I was
Mhm.
based with the
Yeah.
company. Documentaries were done on me. I have traveled the world. I have a master's degree in political science and communications from Northeastern University in Boston. I have a sports management master's degree from Eastern Michigan University. I have lived in Arizona, New York, now Detroit, and I love Detroit.
Wow.
It's
Okay.
where I reside now.
Mhm.
And, I'm a sister. I don't have any children yet, but that is a desire in the future. And even through this process, like, I'm not afraid to share because I truly believe that everything I'm going through, this universal pain will bring forth universal healing. Right. And
Mhm.
that's because we go
Mhm.
through things sometimes to be able to have the conversation to make sure other people could be educated through this process.
Thank you so much for sharing. And I was watching your video on LinkedIn and hearing you share that you're very present, right? Public facing within this role. As you said, like documentaries were made on you. And unfortunately, I know like so many people in my community have shared the same thing. We're in these very prominent roles. And so it can be confusing when we experience this level of mistreatment and retaliation. So I want to just ask about like, did you experience any confusion around that, right? Being like applauded, being like upheld in this role, and then for it to switch. The concept that's coming up is from pet to threat. So many of us experience in the workplace, coined by three Black women professors. Was that process at all confusing when you were
I
working?
read that. I remember reading that article, and I actually sent it at the time to the chief revenue officer in the company because, like you said, like, I wasn't thinking this was a thing. I was thinking I'm the person that's going to help, right? Like, like, I know that stuff
Mhm.
exists, but I'm just like, for whatever reason, you've decided to adopt me, right? Like, you've decided to take to me. You've decided to put me at the forefront to be an example for this company, to market to people to thousands of people that are coming in, right? To thousands that are there. Not just a documentary here, but representing the company in the other documentaries, right? Like, I'm thinking that we could have these I could tell you, like, this is what I'm hearing, because now you've put me in the position. So now people are reaching out for one-on-ones, right? People that are experiencing things on their own are now reaching out to me to say, wait, like, this person harassed me, or this person did this, or this person, and I'm like, what? Right? Like, you mean, like, so now I'm like, okay, well, you got to advocate for yourself, right? Like, but not only are you going to advocate for yourself, but I'm also going to bring this up to the people that I meet with on a regular basis, that wanted to have one-on-ones with me, that, like, kind of pulled me in. So I think that's the part that, yes, you get to that point of like, you've positioned me to be here, but then now that I'm bringing forth not just problems, but solutions. I'm very much this is the problem, but this is what we can do to fix it, right? Like, or this is what we can do to support both people, right? To create a win-win, whether somebody needs training and this person needs to get the promotion that they deserve, right? Like, or we need to create a system now that, so for example, I remember there was a young girl that had Black girl, and there was a white male and an Arabic male that she was basically trying to get all three of them were trying to get a promotion in the promotion in their role, and she came prepared, had her presentation. She's the only one that didn't get promoted, even though one had a had a letter, and the other one supposedly they just was in trouble, had gotten in trouble before, and she never got a letter, never was in trouble, was high producing, and then but was told like she wasn't ready yet, or that was her terminology, or it was also told that I guess she might have been late before, right? But no real reason, nothing that was substantial. Right. So with that situation, this young lady did go on to advocate for herself. She was a mentee, right? Like, so she went on to advocate for herself. And to be honest, that's, I low-key believe that's when the target on my back definitely got larger, right? Because of just saying, hey, you need to advocate for yourself. And she was able to do so, and she was she succeeded in that, retroactively given her promotion, and maneuvered forward. So I share that story, right? Because when you are in a position of power, right, or influence, you do have the ears to make change, right? And I helped that young lady make change, and I know that in empowering her, that set the tone even for her own journey. I did also take that, and I was able to have these conversations. So it wasn't until I think it started happening more that now people are like, oh, we don't like this. we don't like this. We put you here because we needed to check a box, but we don't really want you out here working, right? Like that's at least how it started to feel, right? So that's why I wasn't seeing it, right? Like in the sense as like this was gonna happen, this was gonna be a problem for me, right? Like I wasn't written up, like I wasn't getting in trouble, like I was doing my job, and so when you put me on things like a Black Wealth Gap Committee or a Wealth Gap Committee internally, right, to be able to assist, noticing things. So in Urban Institute in 2019, at the time, I remember it saying like, Blacks have a higher percentage interest rate, like 1% higher. And because I was a mortgage banker for so long dealing with purchases, like I know when we raise our rates and when we don't raise our rates, right? And I remember saying, hey, like maybe we should pull the data. Right? Like, of course, you got to protect yourself. Maybe we should pull the data and take a look to see if we could unintentionally be adding to the racial divide because we've decided to increase our FHA rates, right? Like, because you didn't increase the conventional ones, you only increased the FHA ones, right? So maybe let's take a look. And of course, that's when I got the big threat of, Northover, if you continue down this, if we as a company decide we're going to raise rates, then we're going to raise rates. And Northover, you continue down this path, it won't end well for you, right? And that's in a virtual room looking at the chief risk officer of the company with with HR there, who wasn't even intent, like I didn't even know she was going to be on the call, right? Like, so I was blindsided by this. My HR wasn't there, my leader wasn't there. Like, these are people that are, like levels above, and this all came from highlighting, right? Like the areas of opportunity, we could put it that way, right? Like that were affecting certain classes, certain protected classes. Same thing we say around George Floyd and the pandemic, right? You say that you want more minorities in leadership, and every company went on that spiel. We are gonna, promote and do all the right things and be more diverse, and so then I'm saying, hey, I referred Marissa, but Marissa, it's been a week and you ain't called Marissa back, right? So what's the protocol? You gonna call her in 2 days? You gonna call her in 5 days? Like, what's the process? Because I'm starting to notice, like, if I'm not getting involved, then people aren't necessarily getting a call back, and it tends to be certain people. That's the problem, right? Like, and so of course I put that in writing, but once again, not at the time. In hindsight, I could look at it now and be like, oh yeah, like, this is the day when they were just like, she's a target. She's the problem, right? In hindsight, looking at all of this, but in real time, you're not thinking it, especially when you've been at a company for so long. You're just thinking you're doing what you need to do to try to help, like, right? Like, to make the situation better. And so those things start happening, and then you start seeing, going into Teams meetings and people looking at you like, why are you here? Especially when you're the only Black woman, right? Like, and often, and people that should be asking, adopting and asking me questions, or know that this was, I'm here because this is my idea, right? Like, we're working on something, and together, like, why are you not asking everybody else why they're here, right? Why are you just asking me? So little things, microaggressions started happening, right? People were second questioning me often, and I wasn't used to that. I wasn't used to that because that didn't happen before, right? And so then now I'm just trying to play the high role, and let's have a meeting to talk about, right, why you tend to be lashing out at me in meetings. And I try to get HR involved, and I do all the things textbook you're supposed to do. You're an employee. And I do, and that's what brought about the confusion, right? Because if I'm doing everything I'm supposed to do, and I know I really haven't done anything wrong, not really, I haven't done anything wrong, then why am I in this situation where I'm constantly having to defend myself? Right? I'm constantly, like, I remember writing a letter once saying that I feel invisibly visible. Like, I'm visible, but I'm invisible. If I'm supposed to be on a meeting, then why is my name not on the meeting list? Why is my name there, but you're not telling me when the meeting exists for me to be a part of the meeting, right? Like, why are certain things happening that shouldn't? So are you using my name so you could say that you have a Black person on the team, but you don't really want me there? Like, what is happening? Like, I don't know. And a lot of things like that, right? Like, started to happen, and then your hair starts to, I don't know what's happening, so I'm confused. And then when you're confused, now I'm crying, and then now I find myself stressed out, and now I'm asking questions as to why. It's a whole second job to figure out why what's happening to you is happening to you. So emotionally, thank God I had a therapist, right? Like, in this time. But it was one of those things where I don't want to believe that this is a racially discriminatory thing that's happening to me. I don't want to believe that it's retaliation because I'm speaking up, right, for protected classes. But the reality is that's exactly what it is. That's you use my face, you use my likeness when it benefits you. And then the minute that I have a voice for my own to try to, like, chime in and be a part of the solution, that's a problem.
Thank you so much for naming that. Yes. And I had a very similar experience. It was around the same time, as you mentioned, like, after the murder of George Floyd. I feel like a lot of companies were trying to put Black employees into leadership positions without the adequate support. And then when we came up with, as you said, solutions that were based in our expertise, our lived experience, that kind of, like, shook the proverbial boat too much, right? And then we became the threat so often. So thank you so much for sharing that. You mentioned when Black women advocate for ourselves in the workplace, and I want to ask more about that. just in your experience and maybe other experiences that you've heard, right? When we begin to advocate for ourselves and actually help each other advocate for ourselves, there's a target that comes on our back. And just anything that you've personally experienced and witnessed around that when we do advocate.
Yeah, I think to be, people sometimes always say like, well, when do you think this started? I think this started because I was an advocate, right? Naturally, I'm a person that it wasn't. I was, when I got hired into the company, the reason why a documentary was done on me is because, and I'll just give you guys a backstory. Like I had applied like 77 times. Like I applied dozens of times to work for Rocket Mortgage. I mean, it's one of the largest lenders in America. It's like, there's sports teams, right? Like they're across the board. They own a lot in the city of Detroit. So my vision with working there was, they might be involved with sports and different things that are taking place. So it'd be a great place to work. And so in coming in, I mean, I passed all my exams first try. I was MVP. Then I became President's Club mortgage banker, purchase banker as fast as you could. Had over 100 reviews, which have now been taken offline, but 100 reviews from people across the nation. I was licensed in 31 different states. I brought in $40 million into the company in one year. And so for me to roughly 40 million. So for me to, I had the accolades, right? Like, and I was in a space where, so now you're asking me to speak, though. So now you're saying, oh, like, Zara, you're great. And we want to do a documentary on you. Or, hey, can you go down to DC? And so they get to be a part of the NBA documentary, right? Like, so I'm representing the company. You're asking me to speak to younger teams coming in, right? We want to increase and have more diversity. So that's also part of the reason why you create it, right? You use my face and likeness. What people don't always talk about, which is why I respect, and when I did these semi classes, and I would say, listen, it's not that mentors and people don't even necessarily want to help you. They do, but you have to imagine that it might be hundreds of people reaching out, right? Like, to try to have a one-on-one, to talk to you, to email. And then, I started noticing, okay, if I talk to a team of 20 people, I might get 4 or 5 different people that's going to now reach out with the one-on-one or, in an email. And if I get an email, what am I going to not respond? So that's a separate job in itself. That's not my job, right? Like I still have the same amount of phone calls I got to make. I got to still reach out to clients and do all these things. So this is like extra. So those things were happening more, right? Like, especially after the documentary now, but then it gets a little bit more serious because if you are a Black young professional, you get excited when you see another Black woman or a Black professional that's in a higher position. So you're going to reach out. And in doing that, for me, it's like, then now you start to hear when people are having issues, right? And their own personal issues. And then you're like, that's really like, I mean, like, and you're like, that should be like that. Like, absolutely not. Right. Because it didn't happen. Right. And if it didn't happen to me, it's like, because they sometimes will pick and choose who they could feel like they could play with. Right. Like, I mean, like, and as you talk about, like, there's a difference with when you're an introvert, right? I mean, oftentimes introverts are even more targeted, right, than someone who's extroverted, because, and because I thought about that early in my career, like, why isn't that some of the things that I noticed started happening to so many people around me didn't happen to me? And then I'm like, well, I'm very vocal, and kind of how I got this, I was writing the CEO, right? I had no, like, the CEO says an open door, and I'm like, my name is Zara, right? Like, so that's probably why it wasn't happening the same way, right? Initially, but then it became that the pet goes to threat, right? Like, so now, because I'm saying that's not right, you need to speak up for yourself. But not only am I telling someone else that they need to speak up for themselves, but I'm also taking it as far as having the conversation, because I'm aware of, even if I tell you to go and report something, may or may not happen. But it's different now if you report it and then now somebody else, right, of influence is saying something on your behalf, right, or saying something overarching, right? Hey, you guys got to really check your leaders. You really got to do X, Y, and Z. Maybe we should do a peer mediator, peer survey. Maybe we should be having the peers review their leaders, right? So therefore, it's a checks and balances, right? Like, so that's the way that I had operated, was like, we need to create the solutions for things that are happening, not just complaints. So I would operate with both, but in doing so, after a while, I think, higher ups are like, well, who's this Zara girl? Because she's not even really a leader, right? Like, and she's trying to tell us what to do. And I do remember one lady said to me, well, how would you feel if someone came into your area of business and told you what to do? And I said to her, I said, well, we're all the same company, right? Isn't it one company? Like, I guess I'm confused. Like I don't see it as different areas of business. I see we are one team. So if there's something that I'm seeing that could help your team, which affects technically the whole bottom line, then why wouldn't I?
Right.
Like, and I think that's where there's a bit of crabs in the barrel mentality that takes place with some people, right? Like, that happens, and it's like, oh, I'm not. Which is unfortunate, right? Where you might come to me, and I wasn't like this, but it's like you might come to me to ask for help, and I'm like, oh yeah, I'm not about to sign up to help Marissa, because if I help Marissa, right? Like, I mean, like they about to come for me. So. But we're really stronger together. That's the crazy thing, right? It really would be stronger if most people banded together to say that this is a problem.
Yes.
This is what the solution needs to be. But it's always when it's the opposite, because it was a Black woman that made that comment to me about, somebody coming into business and making that, and in my head, that's why I was like looking like I was that stunned me even more. Right, like for because I was such a advocate in helping other people, that now I'm saying I need help, and people are just like, yeah, I don't know, I'm not trying to touch that with a 10-foot pole, and you're trying to navigate in this space where people just accept the wrongdoing, right? They accept the injustice because they fear, right, the retaliation that's going to come from it.
That's such a good point. Yes, and that can feel so isolating, right? And it's just coming across YouTube, really. Dr. Kamani, I don't know if you're familiar with her channel, Lifting As We Climb Consulting, and her sharing her story about being in a toxic job, and then me being in the chat, right, when I was going through this, because I had no idea what was happening, and being able to see how many Black women this has happened to in particular, for me to be like, oh, it's not just me. And I was able to externalize what I experienced. And I think that's the value of sharing our stories. Right. So we can see the common threads.
Absolutely. And I can honestly say, right, even people that do pursue to fight a lawsuit, at the end of the day, it's scary because it's called the chilling effect, the legal term, right? I'm not a lawyer, but I've learned so much, right? That I'm learning all these terms. And the chilling effect is basically like when somebody says well, if you sue, you're going to get blackballed, right? Because this blackballing basically kind of comes because if you choose to go public, like how we're having these conversations, I mean, you're putting it out there that you're in a lawsuit, right? So now if somebody Googles and, pulls stuff up, and this is a conversation that they see, without even acknowledging it, even though it's a legal protected activity under the federal law, right? So someone basically shouldn't say, we're not going to hire you because you're suing this company, right? Somebody shouldn't say that. But if they see these messages, they'll find something else to say, right? I mean, they're not going to tell you. So it is, you have to, I prayed and thought long and hard, right? Through this process, because once you go public, you can't go back, right? The digital space, the digital airways are just there. And, but for me, I just kept thinking, our people perish for lack of knowledge. It's very much a spiritual journey as well, because I don't want people to not have the knowledge of what takes place in the midst of a lawsuit, or what was my decision. What came into my mind to even decide to do this? Because at some point you need one person to say enough is enough, and talk about the experience, because we're not privy to this experience. You don't graduate from college going into a master class and they say, hey, yeah, discrimination exists, but this is what you do if you end up in the situation, right? We didn't get the steps. So the steps tell you go to HR, but HR is not your first line of defense. Your first line of defense is either a trusted partner or mentor that might be in a higher position at another company, right, that you could talk to, or going to getting an employment law consultation, right? Which are free, right? You say, this is what happened to me at work, because it's either they're going to say, you don't really have a case, but you should go to HR and report this claim, or file a claim with the EEOC. So you'll get the right steps, and you'll have at least a better understanding now going to HR. Because if you just go to HR, that target is there, that they assess the liability, and if you're the liability in the situation, that's when retaliation will start. They may not necessarily fire you right away. It's going to start with either you'll start seeing less responsibilities, or you'll get micromanaged where all of a sudden leaders are looking into your work that weren't ever looking into your work before. Because I know that happened to me. And, like you'll get written up or people nitpick things. And I'm like, where is this coming from? Right. But it's because they want you to quit. Right. Like they're not going to fire you, but they want you to quit on your own. Right. So, I started this lawsuit while I was still working there. So it's not like I was, I ended up on medical leave after having that meeting that I shared with you guys. And then shortly after that, 2 weeks later, I actually received a card in the mail. This is the card I received from the company.
Wow.
And inside the card, after hearing, I see a great year in your future, or bananas, it's unclear. Then 2 weeks later, I received this card that said, I see a great year in your future, or bananas, it's unclear. Happy birthday anyway. And it's signed by the CEO and the COO of the company, right? Former. So
it's infuriating.
Yeah, like I tell people all the time, like, this is, I was in shock. Like like tears. Like, like I was that cheesy girl that I drank the Kool-Aid, right? Like, so I was the girl that looked forward to getting my birthday card every year, right? Like, and sending a message. I even have the emails I've sent in the past to a CEO or whoever. Thank you for my card, right? Like, I was that girl. So to me, there is no coincidence. And I get threatened. I see it, right? If you continue down this path, it won't end well for you. And then I receive a card like that looks like this in the mail. It's a message, right? That's trying to be sent. And I ended up on medical leave, and when I went to church that Sunday during that time, and there's a sign behind my pastor that said "bigger than me," and that's when I knew that I needed to file, because yes, I have a relationship where I probably could have emailed the CEO, but the CEO also was going through a stroke, like not the CEO, the president, the founder of the organization. But then I was like, well, what are they going to do? Are they going to apologize? Are we still at that point? Because there's so many things that have happened on this journey that at some point somebody just has to advocate and stand up towards those injustices. Accountability needs to take place. And that's where the tough part during that time was. It was also George Floyd, and it was also the pandemic. So, the EEOC was swarmed. You could file a complaint, but then it was months if you got, the opportunity to actually get the charge. So for those who don't know, the EEOC is the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, and every state has their version of that. So if something does happen in the workplace, you also are limited with how much time that you have. It's these deadlines that also hinder some people from being able to move forward because they don't understand. So the deadline doesn't start the day that you go to the EEOC. The deadline starts the day of the act. So if I, for example, receive the card on, March 1st, then the reality is 180 days from March 1st is the amount of time that I have to go to the EEOC to file a complaint. Once you go to the EEOC, you file an inquiry. Once you go through the inquiry portion, then you have to do an interview. And in that interview, there's someone that's going to be reading, all the whatever it is that you send over, taking down, and then it's called they'll issue a charge of discrimination. So they'll assess to see whether they'll take it on, and don't feel bad if they don't, because it's only about 3%. It's very low percentage, maybe less than 30% of cases they actually take on.
I didn't know that. Okay.
And so if they don't take it on, what they typically will do though is they issue what's called a right to sue, and that is the process if you want to bring forth federal claims to court. So. For me, in the first case, I couldn't get an appointment for the life of me, and I would be there 12. They'll say check at 12 o'clock at night. Go in, do that. So there was somebody, and I was in distress, and that's why I got to remind people. Like there were times I remember just sitting in the dark, I really was I was mentally off, and then I'm watching Sandra Bland and Trayvon Martin, and all these things are happening at the same time. I'm watching Harriet Tubman on what is it, the Underground Railroad? Like I'm watching all these shows. My mind is so I'm just like, this is. I had to, but I knew that I only had a short period of time if I was going to do something. So when I saw that bigger than me sign, and a friend said, hey, well, there's these two ladies I know that are starting out, and I don't know the difference, right? Like we're trying to, like I'm reaching out to some people, you don't get responses. So then, okay, they take on the case, but they weren't, they don't even practice employment law to this date, right? Like, so, I mean, they left, like, so clear, it just wasn't the right fit. And I think that in itself does affect your case, because if somebody's not pleading your case properly, right, or efficiently, then that sets the tone of how it's going to be. So this case, the first case ends up getting, they tell me to find another attorney. I find another attorney, and same thing, another referral. But I didn't have that EEOC. So it says, you need to go through the proper judicial steps. You need to go file the EEOC claim. You need to do this. You need to do that. So I did what we were supposed to do. And we filed another claim, because when I went back to work, right, after filing this claim while I was on leave, I eventually go back to work. And that's when they all of a sudden now dissolve my team, right? All of a sudden, the team that I'm on is no longer a team. And I find like they supposedly, they ruled in favor. So it wasn't a full dismissal, like prior to me coming back. And then that 7th we hear a response, and then the 10th, when I'm supposed to, like, I have a conversation with them, they're saying, oh, we're going to dissolve your team, and you have to choose from taking a small severance package, or this. And in my head, I'm thinking, like, what? Like, that doesn't even, like, so I'm messaging my team. I'm like, hey, like, did you guys, and they just found out. I'm like, that doesn't even make any sense. Most people have at least 2 weeks to make a decision. Not a weekend, right? Like, not a weekend. There's rare. Where do you find anybody saying that we're dissolving a team and you only have a weekend to make a decision as to what you're going to do next? Like, and so that's when I was like, so the retaliation started obviously coming back, and this is a new claim, right? Because it's new harm. So that's where we are before the Supreme Court right now, is because I went through the proper channels, the judicial channels, so I could even bring federal claims. They're saying that we should have joint, right? These cases should have been merged, amended, and put together, as opposed to 2 different claims. But you can't go before the federal court if you never went to the EEOC. So there's dispute there, right? Like, like there's contradiction. And so when the judge dismissed my case, right, first of all, it was not only, let me backtrack, not only did I have this forced transfer, but my success in the company, even the documentary, was on purchase banking. They put me in refinance banking. At that time, rates are like 7-8%, right? Like, like coming off of when were like 2%, right? Like, so that's and it wasn't what I was trained on. Like, my experience and my expertise was in the purchase world, and you put me in refinance, right? So that was one thing. Then it's like the expectations to work from like 7:30 in the morning to 7 o'clock at night, and I just came back from a 9-month medical leave. Like that doesn't even make sense. So now I'm advocating going back and forth, and then you're making me a new hire. So I'm going from making close to 6 figures to $15 an hour. Right? Like, so now we're talking about over a $20,000 pay cut, right? Like, so all these things because I filed a lawsuit while I was on leave, and I actually came back, and maybe you didn't expect me to come back, but I knew, right? Like, like, I'm not, at some point we have to take a stance, and none of this stuff was happening before. I was winning awards. I was nominated. We Are the They, right? Like all these different types of awards with nominated for awards, and the go-to person and a speaker to now being treated and humiliated by, this experience internally. So, I continued to pursue, like, tons of different things would happen, because some people, not everybody knows when these things take place. Like, it's not like they're going to broadcast Zara Sue in the company, right? But then, so that therefore, that's what makes it even more isolating, right? Because even though we might be sister friends or coworkers, it's not like, like, if we're not best friends, I'm not going to run around telling everybody this is what's happening, right? And so then you end up in a situation though where you start realizing everybody's saying, hey, purchase queen, come on my team. Come on my team. Why are you over there? Why are you doing that? Right? Like, so you're like, okay, well, I want to come on your team. The higher up said, no, you can't go. Higher up said, no, you can't go. So you're blocking my advancements. You're blocking the opportunity for me to interview at other roles. So that's where I was like, this is straight retaliation, right? That I'm dealing with at this point, because I'm back after filing the suit, and all these things start aligning. So when the judge dismissed both of these claims, she claims that it should have been they should have been merged. But what my attorney at the time did right was what he said. He said, "Well, Your Honor, if you believe that these claims should be connected, then like you have the authority to do so, right? Like so, but don't get rid of a viable claim, this viable claim right here, the retaliation, based off because discrimination is one of the hardest things to prove, right? Like if you don't have a recording, right? Even though I have a card, right? You would think that this speaks for itself, but it's like if you don't have the recording, if you didn't watch the person put it in the mail and send it to you, right? Like of course you're going to say all sorts of things within the law to try to potentially have the law to rule on their side. So after all of that stuff happens, that's why we're before we went to the Court of Appeals, because the lawyer at the time, same thing, said, hey, like the judge was wrong in her decision, so we're going to pursue this. So at first I thought it was over. I was like, all right, good. I'm going to start to write my book, which I did, right? The Cost of Justice. And I'm going to, I'm doing this. I'm going to position myself to do a TED Talk, like, because I knew that this experience then now is the thing that I want to be able to educate people on. So like, I didn't go through this for nothing. So when he said, let's pursue it, that's okay. That's fine. But of course, they're talking about, now because they had terminated me, right? Like now that's another case. It's wrongful termination because I shouldn't have been terminated, right? Like, right. So find out in March 27th. And then, so it's these things that took place that then opened my eyes even more to what was really at stake. And what's at stake is us as Black women don't necessarily have the resources to fight. So that's why they get away with this, right? Because they just don't think they can do it. Right? Like even from a legal perspective, people just see it as, oh, this could be a quick settlement. So let me take on the case, get this $100K, have her sign this NDA and keep it moving, right? Because I'll make 33% or 40% of that, right? So like there's so many things that if you're not in the know to position yourself to be in the right situation, that affects you. So imagine not being a lawyer, you're the victim in the situation, you're dealing with the anxiety, you still got bills to pay, so you are still working. Like it is a lot. And I always tell my therapist that God rest his soul, right? Because he was on overdrive, right? Like, trying to help me process all the things that are happening, but not just process, but have the tactics and the tools to be able to overcome what was happening to defend myself, right? So I started to have to mentally tell myself, right, at the end of the day, a lawyer is, whether you're a plaintiff lawyer or a defendant lawyer, like you're both defending someone, right? So these lawyers are doing their job, right? Like their job is trying to get them off the hook and nothing happens. So, and then not to say that I don't take it personal, it's like I just expect it. I expect that they're going to call me names. I expect that they're going to try to tarnish my character. The beautiful thing is, I was an Olympian before I came to Rocket Mortgage, right? I was the girl that you did a documentary on and you wanted to use my experiences. I have a Wikipedia page, right? Like I was somebody before coming here, right? So, so the reality is, and whether you have a Wikipedia page, whether you are an Olympian, you're still somebody before going somewhere, right? Nobody deserves the hostile abuse, right? Like, that comes with retaliation, right? Like, and mentally trying to diminish me, whether it's even through the court aspect now, I just had to say that they're only if that's their line of defense is because they don't really have anything, right? Like, and so then now you talk like through these processes, settlements become a thing too, right? So there are conversations, and I knew that God told me flat out, though, like that I needed to tell this story. I knew I was a walking testimony, and I'm going to be singing the gospel, right? Because I don't want other women or men or any protected classes, right, to be in a situation where if I can support them by giving them insight, that they could be better off. And that's exactly what has happened, right, throughout the journey in itself. There's been plenty of times where people have called me. The same VP, the same CRO that threatened me said to another Black woman, "I have to muzzle you like a dog" in front of her subordinates. And she was a VP. She was a VP, and so and thankfully, she did write an affidavit, right? Like, but these are things that, so it's public record, but these are things that exist. And she filed her own claim, like, right? Even though she didn't pursue, she just decided to move on. what's beneficial for me was the fact that she at least filed the claim. So that's why I'm really encouraging anyone that's feeling like it feels resonant. I'm not saying you have to fight, because it is a lot to fight. It's a lot to fight. But at least the bare minimum, file the complaint. Because if you're gonna quit anyway, if you're gonna get fired right? If you're fired or you're gonna quit, send the exit letter in, because what happens now is when it comes to what's called discovery phase of a lawsuit, they request, I could say, hey, I want to see all the exit interviews from Black women for the last 3 years, or you know what I mean, like, and then now if 10 people said this happened to this leader, that would actually benefit, right? Like, I mean, like, right. So that's why I'm like, if you speak up, even if you don't fight back, right? Like, but at least by simply sharing your story could be the difference with someone winning a case, right? Like, which, you know what I mean? Like, or being able to, or that person eventually getting fired. Because eventually, if everybody was to say that this person's a problem, the company is going to be do something about it. But if it's only one person here and there, it's their word versus yours. If it's maybe 2 people, like, I mean, like, so it's like, that's why I'm always like, you have to err on that side, but most people don't, because they fear retaliation. And it's tough to say, but one of the things that I often talk about is, I knew that when I made the decision, it's either I was going to be the oppressor, right, or an advocate for the oppressed. Because if I silence myself, I'm no better. I'm no better than the company. If I don't say anything about what has happened to me, then I'm actively choosing to allow this to continue without any documentation. So when the next person behind me goes and says something, I'm only making it harder for them because I didn't say anything before. And the person before me didn't say anything. And the person before them didn't say anything. So, when my friend told me, Zara, whether you say something or you don't say something, it's mentally going to impact you. Workplace PTSD is a real thing. So these traumas, right, like, impact you regardless.
Yeah. Can I ask you about the fear, right? Because that's so real. And even working with Black women healing from workplace trauma, this is one of the biggest things that I hear all the time, right? The fear of sharing your story, of telling your truth when you're ready. Because as you said, sometimes it takes time to get to that point. How you moved through any initial fear that you had towards this goal of sharing your story and for other people coming along behind you.
So the thing was, for me, it's like, because you're just unsure of even how to, like, I'm unsure of even how to navigate the lawsuit, right? Like, even when you have a lawyer, right? Like, it's not like all my friends had suits before. So it's not a community of people even talking about this. And then the few people that I did hear that were in something similar, they signed NDAs. So they couldn't talk about it, right? Like, so it's an interesting, complex situation that takes place. So while you want to be then potentially the first to talk about it or put yourself out to talk about it, you think about, I remember for me, it was just like, man, I went all of 2024 basically without work, right? Like, but it was also around that time that I had to defend myself, because my attorney on one hand at the time is saying, we're moving forward, we're proceeding. And then when they offer me a settlement amount, but then I call their bluff. I said, okay, I'll accept your settlement, but I'm not signing an NDA, right? Like, like, I'm not going to be silenced. And I could say that because it's public record. It was in the brief, right? Like, and because, like, so if we can't agree on non-monetary terms, right? Like, then I don't get it. If I supposedly lost 2 cases, then why are you trying to offer me money, right? Like, I mean, like, so, like, for me, I'm like, because you want my silence. You're paying, right? Because you want me to be silent about this situation, and I can't not help people. So all those things for me to overcome the fear was it was spiritually driven. So anytime I went to church, it was always some scripture that like, like that would jump out. So to start the lawsuit was bigger than me. The decision not to settle, was when I went to a guest church, actually a different church. And I remember the pastor saying, oh, we're going to read out of Matthew. It was Matthew. He mentioned first Matthew 5, verse 33. And then he was like, oh, no, I mean Matthew 6, right? So I actually went to Matthew 5. And the crazy thing was that verse, I believe it was a concept of the verse was like, don't break the oath. That's what it said. So right, and that was the mistake. That was the mistake verse. Do not break the oath with the Lord. And I was like, oh, there's no way I could sign like God is telling me that I cannot, right? Like he's called me to this fight. It's bigger than me. And it's just not worth it and it's not about the money. It's about my mental health, right? Like I release when I speak. I'm a speaker because I use my experiences to educate and empower others. And if I can't talk about 8 years of my life, I mean, the spiral of just even thinking about that, like I get emotional, like mentally, like my eyes start to like, like behind, I get emotional because I can't imagine not being even in a position. I have friends now that are like, Zara, I wish I could help you. But like, I can't risk even resharing what you've posted because you're right. I'm tethered to a piece of paper that I signed. And I don't know what crosses the line. There's gray areas so same thing. It's this fear of, do you say, F it, I'm going to do it anyway? But then are they really going to come back for my money? Because that's what typically happens. You sign an NDA and then they can prove that you said you broke the contract in any way. Then whatever amount of money you settled for, they could potentially come for it. Right. Like, so that's where it's like, I'm not, knowing that there's a book I'm here to educate and empower people. So I have to rise above. And if I truly am a Christian that believes that God has got me, then God has got me. So, and with that comes wisdom and courage and strength and strategy, right? Like, so, even with that, it's like, when is the right time? This company owns, right? Like so much. I mean, it's also, they have large PR teams and other things. So for me, it didn't, I wonder, sometimes I look back and I'm like, should I have gone public sooner? I remember at one point a comment was made like, oh, well, if she was really that big time or if this is going to be talked about, then why hasn't it happened yet? Right. Like, and that was a little earlier on. And that was also, I didn't go public, right? Like I didn't reach out. I didn't put anything out there. I mean, even when I did my TED talk, I talked about my experience as a pro se, but I didn't, I even showed the card, but I didn't say who the company was, right? Like I didn't call out anybody directly. So the reality was, in taking that, the fear was still sometimes, even when I say it, it's like, well, what's going to happen now? Right? Like, is there something I don't know about? Like now that I'm in the Supreme Court, but I knew that if I didn't do it now, when would it happen? Right? Like this is one of the highest court levels you could even get to. And that in itself is like, as a pro se litigant, normally people don't normally take it this far. Right? It's not expected, but you could see from a business standpoint, from when you're working with a lawyer, why do they ask you to settle? If they have a brick and mortar building, they have bills to pay. If they have people on payroll, paralegals, other people, they have bills to pay. So if they're feeling pressure because they only get, if they took you on contingency, they only get paid if you get paid. So therefore a settlement will come faster than a jury trial. And that you then have to think about. So then sometimes, and that's what's crazy through this process. Do all lawyers do that? I don't think so, but I don't know, right? But do some lawyers do that? Absolutely. And, and it's like, can you fault them for thinking that way? But then you have to ask yourself, but then are you really fighting for justice for me? Right? Like, or are you fighting to get a paycheck and however you get there is what you'll do. Right? Like, and that's still a question, like, you're not going to know until you reputational, like you'll start to see like, oh yeah, this lawyer goes all the way no matter what, but then they may have a wait list, right? Like, and they just at capacity and can't even take your case on. So I think for me, when my attorney basically, said, if you don't take this, I'm not going to represent you, right? When I wouldn't take that, then I had to get to a point of saying, all right, well, I guess this is where God has me. And this is November. I thought the brief was done. I thought things were done. Things weren't done. Right. So now I'm calling other lawyers, but they're just like, not that they said that there's no case. They're just like, it's November. Most people in fourth quarter take a break, right? Like, we're not taking new litigants until February, this time, that time. So then I looked up how to file a motion to expand the record. To extend the time, to give myself the time to be able to do it. And the judges granted it. Thank God for Chat GPT. Thank God for the clerk's office, right? Thank God for these things that gave me a fighting chance. And then it's just, thank God for a support system of family, right? Like, that said, well, we got you, right? Like, so, and I know that most people don't have that, right? Like, and so therefore, how can you fight when you don't have support, right? So, I had some support and I had savings. I blew through my savings. But I did what I could for as long as I could being in that library, and I don't have any, to be honest, I don't have any regrets. Like, like, because at the end of the day, I'm fighting for myself. I'm fighting for people that come after me, because I saw changes made when I went back to the office, right? Like, we didn't have what's called, like guidelines, like an anti-succeed or something that kind of you could hold people accountable to before this process started. So now I go back and there's more than one lawsuit taking place, and now we have antis to succeed, right? Like, we have this guideline, right, that's there. So because I always tell people, if somebody has to write a check, or if somebody goes to a lawsuit, or it's a reputational thing, they do come back and they say, all right, we got to do X, Y, and Z moving forward, right? I remember with the story I shared before of the young lady, after her situation, now if a leader does not promote somebody that deserves to be promoted, that hits all the metrics, they got to write a statement as to why. So yeah, now that you put something like that in place, there's going to be leaders that second guess deciding to just power through and do what they want to do, right? Like, so this is the reason why I'm saying it's so important. Yeah, it doesn't help me, right? Like, it doesn't help me in this situation.
Yeah.
It helps people that come behind us when you speak up, like, when you have the conversation. And one more piece I want to share too, because there's so many people obviously right now on job searches, right? Like, and sometimes you might even feel this fear or pressure to just take whatever, right? Like, not negotiate always. Like, like you know your worth, you know what you're bringing to the table, and what's for you is for you. Granted, I'm not a lawyer, and I'm not, I'm not in your pockets, right? I don't have your bills, but, I just implore you to believe in yourself, right? And to believe in your worth, and make sure that you ask for it. Because it's one thing to just be told no, and then you make the decision to keep working at whatever they've offered you. But to not ask at all, when you know that the average is 100,000 and they're offering 80, right? Like at least try, right? Like, you know what I mean? Like, so, and I share that because there was this one time that I had applied for a role after, like, like in between this time of being let go, and it was a associate director of diversity, equity, inclusion, but the person reported to the VP. I'm like, so you skip the director, you're going from AD to VP, right? And then it was like listed at like anywhere from like 95 to 110. So then what I didn't get, after 7 rounds of interviews, it was great, and then I'm thinking, okay, we got this. Then at the end they were like, oh well, we wanted somebody with a little bit more director experience. So I was like, so you want director experience for the associate director role? So then I ended up writing the spiel. I mean, at this stage, what have I got to lose? But I sent an email, and I just said, like, thank you for that response. And I was just like, but this is the opposite of what diversity, equity, inclusion is. So you want to hire somebody that's an AD, but yet they're going to be operating in a director aspect, but not paid like a director. That's not equitable. The next 2 weeks later, that role changed to director, and it was listed at 115 to 140,000. But would that have happened if I didn't say something? I don't know, like, but the power of saying something now makes it better for the next person, even if it didn't affect me. And that's kind of how I move from now. Like, I feel like what's for us is for us. And even in this situation, less than 10% get reviewed, right? I'm grateful for the 700 plus people that signed the petition that says, we want to put an end to retaliation. We want the Supreme Court to clarify, right, what constitutes as new harm and what the process is. Because when things are vague, right, if you're paying a lawyer $1,000, $500, $1,000 an hour, big corporate lawyers, right, like, then the reality is when that's taking place, they can find ways to twist the law, right, or to create the narrative when you're not a lawyer, right? Like, and not everybody's going to be in a position where they can fight for themselves. But everybody should at least have that option to choose to if they do so. And if they do, then it should be very plain as to what the law is so that you could address it. And the vagueness is where confusion, right, swims. And that's what we're hoping to clarify going before the Supreme Court. And then the other thing is that everyone, whether you have a lawyer, you don't, deserves, like, they're like to be able to go before the courts, like, to file the claim and represent themselves. And the reason why I talk about the AI and ChatGPT, as much as some people hate it, I can honestly say that it is the thing that has given me a fighting chance in all of this, right? Because by going to the library, fact checking, occasional suits and unreasonable doubt, CSI, like, I mean, I'm not even going to get it twisted. There are times where I saw things on TV and I'm like, let me look this up, right? Like, you know, and then now I'm like, I could use this, right? Like, so you get all excited, and that's where this became. And that's where I always tell people, like, as much as this has been a stressful process, but rewind 5 years from now, I wouldn't have been able to tell you all these things I'm telling you now, right? Like the knowledge I've gained, right? Like that's the silver lining, if you're looking for one, is the knowledge I've gained to be able to advocate, be more confident and confident in representing myself and knowing my worth, right? And knowing and being able to empower and educate people on their worth and the tactics. Because more people, once you learn the tactics, you know the red flags, you know, oh, all of a sudden my name's not on the list. Oh, this is happening. So then you start screenshotting, right? You start taking the notes. You start getting all the documents that you need. So therefore, when that time comes and if they let you go, you may not even have, if you don't want to fight because you're like, you know what, I had already prepared for me to have this transition. But what's not going to happen is you're not going to waste the 10 years that I've been here. Right? Like you're not going to try to just give me $5,000. Here's the discrimination. Here's what has happened. Here are all these documents. I could go to the EEOC or you could give me X, Y, and Z in my severance. Right? Like, so now if more people know how to do that and feel empowered to do that, that's when you're really going to start to see some change and people are going to start to be more just because corporations are going to want to keep writing $50,000, $60,000, $70,000 checks to people, but people don't even know how to position themselves to advocate.
You mentioned a TED Talk, doing a TED Talk on, and you said on representing yourself. Can you talk more about that?
That's how I overcame. That's how I overcame. Yeah. Okay. I did February of 20. It was recent actually. So February, this past February, I did a TED Talk in Boston, and the title is called "We Are Worth the Cost of Justice." You know, and it's on YouTube, yeah, like I was nervous. Like, you know, so that's why I was like, yeah, I'm not about to say the name. Like, I mean, you know, like, but it was the thing that I needed to do to solidify. And I could honestly tell you this, when I went through the interview process to get on to do the TED Talk in Boston, there was the committee, you could see that they were like, ooh, like, can we do this? Right? There was concern, right? Are you like, you're up, you're suing an organization, you're this, like, do we really want to put this out there? Like, do we want to be the one to create the platform to let you speak about this? Well, people come, you know, you could see this was a conversation said to me, but you could kind of pick up on the like, you know, one person in the room was like, ooh, I don't know. Whereas another person in the room is like, ooh, this is juicy, right? Like, you know, like this will be good. So ultimately they said yes, which I'm glad that they did. And like I flew to Boston and the crazy thing, it was the same speech that I had tried to do in Detroit. So I did try to do the same. I applied for Detroit's first and I didn't get into it. And it was my friend that said, Zara, I mean, you've lived in so many different places. You went to school in so many places. She was like, apply somewhere else, right? Like, so, and all I did was copy and paste, basically, right? Like, ended up, I was asked to be the keynote at the TED Talk in Boston, like, you know, based on the topic itself. So to me, that was the start of this, and it was preparing me for this now, to be able to even go on TikTok and share the story, to, you know, have a videographer come out and you know, professionally capture like the statement and the ask, right? Because if we ask not, we have not. And I don't have to fight this. I mean, honestly, the overwhelming outpour of people that I don't even know, even like yourself saying, I would love to have you speak, right? I've signed your petition. I've been through the same thing. Like, there is validation in that. Jackie Abram wrote the book Hush Money. I don't know, have you read it or heard about it, but you know, she was an author early on when I went into this lawsuit. And I was like, I remember listening to the audiobook, and like one day I binged it because I was like, I feel seen, I feel validated, I feel heard. And there was a lot of great tips in there too, right? Of how she was able to advocate and protect herself, but it's exhausting. Yeah. It's exhausting to do all of that, you know, but it's also looking at the silver lining. She created something now that's like a blueprint for some people, right? Like that has been able to support people to to know how to protect themselves better, or just to not even end up in the situation. Because some people will catch on. Like if you start sending those per our conversation emails real quick, if they start seeing you recap meetings, right? Like this is what you told me, right? Like, they know that right? Like, and at that point, sometimes you may not even need to go as far. It may not even go that route, because they're going to be like, oh, let's tighten up. Like, let's leave Marissa alone. Let's leave Zara alone. Like, because they're not the one. So how do we get more people not to be the one? And that's what sharing your story does. That's what saying, I'm not going to forget everything. What is it? The fear they say is like, you could either face everything and rise, or forget everything and run. And by forgetting everything and run, like, you're really only making it worse for the people that are coming behind you. You can't expect change if you don't do something different. And that's what I knew, that this case was bigger. It's bigger than me. And the impact is going to be beyond me, because people will see that it's possible.
Yes.
And where they go from there, is you don't know. Could go anywhere from there. So we'll see. I mean, if they review, to be honest, Marissa, like it's I have a reply that's due soon. And, like I do have someone that is going to be writing in an amicus brief. I've reached out to different organizations, and amicus brief is basically like a document to support, right? Like, saying that not necessarily even supporting me, but just highlighting that these are overarching issues, systematic issues. So the petition and everything like shows that people are obviously paying attention and talking about these things, right? Because it is of a concern. Because Supreme Court, when they look at the case, that's what they're looking at. They're making a decision on if we're going to review this based on, is this something that is a systematic issue? Is this something that needs to be clarified? Because if it doesn't necessarily check those boxes, then it doesn't get reviewed, and which is why those numbers are as low as they are, right? That less than 10% typically get the check mark for reviewed, and probably even less actually get remanded. So what the outcome is, a huge win would be if they say, Zara, we're going to review your case. That's a huge pat on my back, right? Like for doing that, for our backs, right? Because it would have been everybody's collective support for whether it's empowerment. The next level would be that they review everything, and then they say, you know what? Ms. Northover's right. This case should have never been dismissed. We're going to send it back to the courts. And that's what's kind of crazy, because winning is starting all over again. Like winning is literally just saying that I should have had the chance to go through discovery, show my evidence, fight my case. And we're going all the way to the Supreme Court just so I could go back to the beginning and start again. So that's why I said this is a journey. It's not, and it's not for the weak, right? Because it's a lot. It's years.
Years, yes. And so as we wind down, I want to ask how people can sign your petition. As you mentioned, you're representing yourself, and just continue to get the word out about.
Absolutely. So, definitely, I'm on LinkedIn. It's at Zara Northover across the board on all the different platforms. My first and last name. Believe you have the petition in the chat in here. So the petition's there. It's on change.org. But there's a specific link for it. And, some people are sending, whether it's emails or words of encouragement to prosebesties@gmail.com. Prosebesties. So prose, like I said, is self-representing. But, the words of encouragement and people sharing their story really all helps, because there might be something that you detect that, like that maybe I'm missing, or maybe I didn't know, or maybe there's a law that you know of, or maybe there's a case law. So there might be things that people know that could help, right? Like without having to be, thoroughly shouting it from the rooftop that you're helping, but you never know who could come out and help you. But I've just learned in this season that God has said, you're not alone. But if you ask not, right, you can't get the help that you need if people don't know you need it. So the prayers, of course, the positive thoughts, stay tuned in, not necessarily even just to see what's going on with me, but even for yourself. And if you have a friend that's going through this, because that's the next thing, like, how do you be a friend to somebody that's going through a lawsuit, right? Like, and that's showing up and being there when you need, listening if you can, whether you understand or not, but just being somebody that somebody can bounce something off really helps, because I feel the burden, right, of feeling like I'm
Yeah.
overwhelming my friends and family. So then now you
Mhm.
go into a deeper depression, right? Like, or a deeper silo, because you feel like you don't have anybody to talk to. So definitely watch out for those things too. And then detect, right? I know that one friend is not going to be the one I'm going to call and talk about this to, right? But she's going to be the one that
Mhm.
says, Zara, you haven't slept, you haven't eaten, let's go get something to eat. She's going to be the friend that's going to say, hey, I booked you a room, go take a staycation, go swimming, right? And then there's
Mhm.
going to be the one friend that's like, sees my life as a movie, right? Like, so wants all the details, right? Wants all the tea, like what happened at
Mhm.
court today, right? Like, like, so it's like, it's allowed. No, you have to normalize this at some point for yourself, because you're living in it. I've been in it for years. So at
Mhm.
some point I had to say, I'm not going to be silent anymore and hide my life. I'm going to live my life out loud. And this is just part of the journey.
Mhm. Thank you so much for sharing. I
Thank
linked the
you.
petition in the description. Yes. So please sign that, as well as the email, Pro Se Besties. If you have any tips or anything to share, that is the email to do so.
Yep. Tips,
Um,
words of encouragement. I mean, it's all love. And
yeah,
that's how we heal, right? And we take this
that's
trauma,
true.
we triumph, right? We're going to triumph over this at the end of it all.
Absolutely. Absolutely. As we end, any last words to share if someone is in a similar position, maybe experiencing workplace retaliation, bullying, harassment in the workplace? Any last words that you'd like to share?
Whew. So definitely just want to remind you that you're not alone, right?
Mhm.
And you have to trust your gut. So if whether you're in it right now, or you think if you think it's happening, most likely it probably is happening. But bringing it up, talking to your therapist, making sure you seek out, whether it's a mentor, ideally from another company, not necessarily your own, or like, I mean, like, or just in general, just so you could see if there's something there. I mean, to be honest, at this stage, ChatGPT is there. So you really can even just say all this,
Mhm.
write out everything that has happened to you, and
Yes.
what does this mean? And then it'll give you
Mhm.
the options of what it could mean.
Mhm.
And then you say, well, what do I need to do? I live in the state of Connecticut, or I live in the state of Detroit, city of Detroit. And then it will also say, here's the EEOC, here's this agency, right? It'll give you all these different places that you could reach out to. So the internet has made it easier, right, for us to find some resources for us to figure out how we're going to move forward. And then if you're a believer, pray about it, right? And if even if you're not, and you have, like, you have friends and family that you could talk to, then talk to them and decide what is it and how do you move forward. If you decide that you're not going to file a lawsuit or anything, and you're just going to find another job, then collect your documents, but then
Mhm.
start
It's
looking,
important.
right? Put
Mhm.
yourself out there to find that next thing. So therefore you could transition your way out. But do make sure that you at least address it, because if you don't address it when it happens, right, it's harder
Yeah.
to address it later.
Yeah.
File the complaint. You could file a complaint with an EEOC and still work, right? Typically, they may end up messaging them, and if you hope that they don't retaliate. They're not supposed to retaliate, right? But they can,
Mhm.
right? Like, so, but if someone has already targeted you, if somebody has already done something that made you feel uncomfortable, if it's happening more and more, it's already happening, right? So ideally, it's not just going to magically get better, right? Like,
Right.
so you do take the steps that you need to take. Really reach out to utilize the free consultations with employment lawyers, because they'll tell you it's either you have a case or you don't have a case. They say we can't do anything until you get fired, or hey, make sure you keep all these documents. Oh, if you go to HR, make sure you tell them that you believe this is retaliation and these words, because if you don't use certain verbiage, it only hurts you if you try to bring a case later. So, like, and these are, like I said, a lot of these things I did not know, right? Like, so because I know now, I want to make sure that people have the knowledge that I didn't have, that made things more complex for myself in the beginning. But we're still fighting, we're still standing,
Mhm.
and we are moving in faith. And I hope you do.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for being here. Again, check out Zara's TED Talk. We are worth the cost of justice, which I'm going to check out after this.
Thank you.
And please sign her petition, linked in the description section as well. This was very informative and a much needed conversation. Thank you so much for this feedback. And we appreciate you. We appreciate you sharing your story. because I know it's not easy. And as you said, having been in the process over the past since 2021, I
Yeah,
think, just continuing to share so that we can see that we're not alone and also our options, right? Knowing that we're not powerless. I think that's huge in healing.
absolutely.
So thank you so much, Sarah, for being
Thank
here.
you.
Thank you so much to all of you who joined in the live chat, who are watching on the replay. And please make sure to sign the petition. Bye,
All
y'all.
right,
Thank
bye,
you
you
so
guys.
much. Bye.